Just as a quick shout out, we also decided to commission an artist to paint a portrait for us. And we reached out to Isla Alexi, who was able to capture a lot of our images and a lot of our kind of like our faces and integrate them into our characters. And it looks really cool. So if you are interested in a commission, I'll definitely put down the information to contact them. They do amazing work, so it's definitely worth your while. Now on to session 2. The party has descended into the basement of this tower of the Delian Order, and when they get in, they discover that it's kind of like a ceremony room. It's got 4 different pillars, and it's got a treasure chest at the very end. And right before, it's got this kind of motto on the wall, kind of transcribed there, saying that the Delian Order doesn't covet material belongings. However, there seems to be a puzzle with the pillars themselves, and so the party member see a treasure chest and they see a puzzle. One of them, I think it's the warlock, he goes over towards the treasure chest and he almost opens it up. It's very obvious that this is a trap because it even has like pearls kind of dangling out of it. And one of the other party members stops him before he does it. Good thing they do, because it was definitely a trap and the entire roof would have just collapsed on them right then and there. But then they end up solving the puzzle with the pillars, and it opens up a moon door right above them. It kind of lets in light. And at that time, the rogue wanted to solidify that he really was part of this Delian Order. So he went over, he actually got into, the player actually put on like very regal, noble clothing, and he brought like a sword with him to session, and then he knelt down and he said the oath. And by doing so, he now made it official that he was part of the Delian Order. And he multi-classed as fighter in order to kind of demonstrate that he really did want to be this knight. As he did that, the trap kind of disengaged, so it didn't really work anymore, and the treasure chest opened up and it demonstrated a brooch that was in there. It's a brooch of blinding, so he can use it in order to illuminate areas that are really dark and maybe even blind fiends when he needs to. So back when the party members were in town and they were talking to the soldiers, they discovered that the soldiers heard about these party members because they went to the mining community before then, the very first session where the other party members were, and they learned about the powers that these people have. So that's how they started to come over towards Orlane. But in doing so, they kind of enslaved, drafted a lot of the villagers there, and they were taking them to Waterdeep, which is the capital, in order to be trained as soldiers. And so now the party members realize that they need to rescue these villagers that have been taken against their will. But they don't really know how to do that because the soldiers have like a 3-day lead on them, so they need to catch up to them really quick. So they tell the mayor that they want to rescue the villagers, and the mayor starts to think, and he's like, there might be a way to do this. He knows of a village of gnomes that's close to the mountains, that they develop a lot of really interesting inventions. Like they helped Orlane develop their irrigation system in order to be a farming community. So he tells them that if they go towards these gnomes, they're called the Cog-clatter Clan, then they'll probably be able to help them get to Waterdeep before the prisoners bring the villagers as hostages. So the rest of the party, they start heading off towards the mountains. And as they do, as they're taking off and they have the wagon with them, they open into kind of like an open field out of the forest. And as they're entering the field, they start to hear mooing, but they don't see a cow anywhere. And then the mooing gets louder, then it gets really loud, and they look up and they see that there is a cow falling from the sky directly on top of them. For this session, I wanted to use an adventure from Rolled and Told, a magazine that publishes a lot of different one-shot adventures. This one's called Goblins in the Sky. So as they're heading off in this wagon and they see this cow falling from the sky, they use their animal handling to avert the splatter of this cow, and then they look up and they see, for the first time for any of them, a ship that looks like it's sailing on the wind, but also has electricity that's coming out of it and some smoke that's issuing forth from some propellers. And it's heading off towards the east. And it looks like there's a lot of goblins that are laughing and throwing things down towards the adventurers. And they're all like, what is going on? Nobody's ever seen an airship at this point. And then, towards their west, in hot pursuit, they start to see 3 other wagons. It doesn't look like they're being controlled by any sort of steeds. It looks like they have smoke coming from them as well. As one of the wagons approaches, a gnome is kind of pulling levers and directing this wagon, and he looks over at them, lifts up his goggles, and tells them, well, get in. You're adventurers, aren't you? Are you going to help us or not? They found the Cog-clatter Clan. The leader of them, this small gnome who's kind of tinkering around with these switches and valves, his name is Mousetrap. And he's telling them that a couple days ago, goblins had taken over one of their new inventions, an airship. And now that they have it commandeered, they are wreaking havoc across the countryside. So it's going to be the heroes' job in order to rescue this airship and try and bring it back. But on top of that, the goblins have also taken a lot of the gnomes that were part of the crew hostage. So if they don't rescue them, they could be dropped off next if they start running out of cows. So the party members get into the wagons and they head off in hot pursuit. And as they get closer towards what looks like a cliff, they don't really realize how they're gonna be able to catch this airship. The airship just sails over the cliff. And all the gnomes that are on top of these wagons, they get off, and then they start removing the canopy of the wagons. And it shows that they have a large ballista on all 3 of these, and then a hot air balloon that they're filling up with air at the same time. And each ballista has what looks like a bipedal plane that they could jump into, and then it would shoot them out, kind of like a crossbow, into the air. And a small propeller would go, and they'd be able to kind of go into aerial pursuit with this airship. So now we have a dogfight situation where they're going to be neck and neck going up against this giant airship in their tiny little bipedal planes. So everyone decides which seat they want to get into, if they want to be a gunner, or if they want to be an engineer, or if they want to be a pilot. And then we've got someone who's in the hot air balloon because they also need some space in order to get the hostages off of this plane. They figure out what the rules are and they jump into the cockpit, and as they get shot out and they start approaching this airship, they notice that there's a swarm, this kind of like mist that comes out from the airship and starts heading in their direction. The goblins themselves also have air support, and they've got these giant wasps that they're riding on top of, and a couple goblins have bows and arrows that they're going to shoot down these planes. So now an aerial dogfight has ensued with these wasps and these planes that are shooting at each other, and then at the same time, all the heroes realize that they need to get over towards the airship as soon as they can, because they can see that the propellers are starting to smoke, and it looks like there's a little bit of flames coming from them as well. The airship is really unsteady. You could crash at any moment. Before they left, the gnome leader, Mousetrap, he gave every player this little like squid-like creature that they can put into their ears, and he says that it'll help them communicate psychically with each other. But he does tell them like, hey, make sure you take this out by dawn, because if you don't, it'll burrow into your head and start to eat the squishy parts. This is important later, so remember this part. So the party members work together as teamwork, and they do a great job at taking out these giant wasps. And then as they get closer to the airship, they can see that one of the goblins looks like a goblin shaman, and it seems like he's really angry that they're kind of beating up all of his infantry. So he grabs one of the gnomes and he pushes him off the airship. We had another guest player join us, and she was playing a rogue gnome who had a little bit of spell ability, and she had Featherfall. So she casts Featherfall onto this other gnome, and it stops him, so he floats down towards the bottom of the floor, and he doesn't get hurt. At the same time, the goblin seems even more angry, and she goes into one of the cabins to get another gnome, so they realize they don't have a lot of time. All the party members, they brought with them potions of jump, so they jumped off the bipedal planes, they landed onto the ship, and now it's kind of like a Pirates of the Caribbean throwdown, with all of them fighting onto this ship, trying to gain control of it again. As they're fighting and trying to defend their territory, they realize that the propellers are starting to make weird noises, and every once in a while, arcs of electricity starts coming out and hitting random people. Sometimes it hits the heroes, and sometimes it hits the goblins, and it does massive damage every time. So they realize that they don't have a lot of time to waste here. And so they fight the best that they can, and they bring down the goblins towards a few, and at that point, they realize that no one is steering the ship. So they start asking the gnomes, the hostages that are there, does anyone know how to steer this thing? And they all kind of like shrug, and they say that the captain, the one who usually does it, he was just thrown off board. So now the party members need to figure out how to steer this ship safely. The rogue gets behind the wheel and he starts to do his best to try and steer this thing, kind of remembering back when he used to be on the high seas and he used to work on a couple of ships. So he starts using that knowledge in order to figure out how to steer this one. And at the same time, the other party members start scattering towards different areas of the ship to try and figure out how they can put out fires or repair certain areas. And luckily, the gnome that came with has a little bit of engineering knowledge, so she's able to help out the rest of the party members heal the ship the best that they can. So now we have a skill challenge to see if they can repair the ship in time. The druid has been in the hot air balloon, and he finally shows up and he starts to shepherd a lot of the hostages onto the hot air balloon. And then as he takes off, he asks everyone else if they really do want to try and repair this ship, because they could leave it there and they'd have the hostages with them. But then if they let the airship go down, they're not going to be able to get to the villagers in time who are being taken to Waterdeep. All the party members look at each other and they realize that the risk is worth the reward, and so they stay there and they try and repair the ship. And after a couple dicey moments, they end up doing it. They bring it back into full gear, and then they're able to coast it safely down to where the rest of the gnomes are. Everyone is rejoicing at this point, because not only have they saved all the hostages, but they also saved the airship before it went down. And the druid who was in the hot air balloon, he had ended up capturing one of the goblins, and he kind of tied it up, and he was thinking about using it as kind of a prisoner to gain more information. But the other party members don't really want to do that, because they are going to be traveling really light, and they don't want a prisoner with them. So there's a debate that ensues trying to see what they do. And finally the warlock is all like, all right, enough. We're not going to do this. And then he cuts the rope and he says no to the druid, and he lets the goblin go. And without even realizing, the warlock has stumbled on to the word that he cannot say. No to the druid. At this point, the curse gets triggered. The druid starts to see all red, and rage just starts to ensue in his mind, and he only wants to do one thing: kill the warlock. And that's where we ended session 2. Next time, we're going to have a PvP, player versus player, and we're going to see who is going to end up victorious, the druid or the warlock. It's life and death at this point, because that's part of the curse. The druid has to kill anyone who says no to him. Pretty dicey curse if you think about it. Well, hey, thanks for listening, and if you are interested in D&D, please reach out. Maybe I can help you out, find some resources, or point you in a direction of where a game is happening. Tune in next time, and you'll hear what happened in session number 4, and, I guess session number 3 and number 4, and then we'll hopefully be able to kind of catch up to where the party members are right now. Thanks for listening, and I look forward to talking to you next time. Everyone be safe out there. Bye now.